Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of the Stephen and Oliver Show. And this one is an interesting one for us because as it drops, it's going to be just after Christmas, probably early part of the new year. It'll be interesting to see how everybody feels about it. So the title of this podcast is The Unsexy Side of Entrepreneurship. And I think we could all agree that in sort of marketing world, social media world and things like that, running your own business, being an entrepreneur is seen to be quite sexy because all you ever see is the successful side of it. But there is a very, very, very dark undercurrent in the whole entrepreneurship world. And we see a lot of it because a large number of our clients are entrepreneurs. And there's quite a few symptoms, shall we say, which are not a lot of fun. Now, I've got a few in my mind, but I thought, well, this is my title, but I should really let Stephen come up with his first, take on what I've brought up here as to what he thinks.
I like the way you just slowly maneuvered that across to me.
Yeah, so the unsexy side of entrepreneurship, how do you see it? What does that mean to you?
So many things come to mind, I guess when we look at things, we see the end. And generally, the end looks okay. It's all put together. It might be shiny. It might be, well sectioned off, and it looks great. But what we don't see is how you get to the end, the journey to get to that point, and the things that you need to do to get there. And I often find with entrepreneurs sometimes people look at them and they will say, "Aren't they lucky?" Which I hate that, because a lot of hard work has gone in to get whatever it is they're doing to that point. And there's a lot of things that they've had to do to make that happen. There's been a lot of sacrifices that they've had to make to get there. There's things that they've had to go without. And, I often speak to many businesses where, they'll say, look, this is my 9th, 10th, 11th go. I've had so many failures along the way. Or I've got another 6 months of this, and if I don't pull it out of the bag and make it work, then I'm going to have to jack it all in. So the unsexy side of entrepreneurship is the things that you have to do to put the building blocks in. And if that means putting your hand down a toilet, if that means having to take a few steps backwards, if that means you've had to go without stuff to get more things, if that means you've had to go to people and go, which many entrepreneurs, I think one of the best things they have is they all go and ask for help. I think if any true entrepreneur in the true sense will say to you that in the early stages, they have that ability to go and ask for help. And then the other unsexy thing is to hold their hand up and go, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. I don't know that answer. And be prepared to do that. So we see the sexy side because we see the end, but there's a lot of things that go into getting whatever it is to that point. And that's what this is all about, really. It's the unsexy stuff that you have to do to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a thing that the purpose of this podcast, first and foremost, I think, is for me to make sure if you know someone who's running a business, check in on them, because they are good at asking, but not necessarily always as quickly as they could do. They're not always as keenly aware of it. And one of the reasons that I feel that is really important is it's one of the loneliest places you can find yourself. Because if you're, and I can think of a few clients, past and present and so forth, that I've worked with, but also people I have no engagement with, but I just hear their stories, where they are the only person.
Yeah.
And I can think of a perfect example of one person I worked with a while ago, and there's many more like them since, but they were the first one to make me realise this, is that they were quite successful at whatever they did. And as a result of that, their family believed in them, their friends believed in them, and the people who came and worked with them believed in them, which is actually a bit of a curse. Because when they came up with some crap ideas, no one saw them as crap ideas because they're like, oh, well, this guy's doing it. So actually, what are we not seeing here? What are we missing? Let's just believe it. Let's buy into it. Let's support him. Where in actual fact, what he needed was someone to say, that's a crap idea. What do you hope to get out of it? And that's what came around when he engaged with me. And it only took about 3 months to sort of give him the virtual slap around the face, the cold water conversation, as I like to call it. So what the hell are you doing? Working in a particularly unrewarding sector, earning not huge amounts of money anyway, working more hours than a junior doctor, and not achieving anything. And you mentioned cleaning toilets and stuff. That stuff was going on. It was horrific. But on the outside, people would look at this individual and think, wow, they're so successful. But yeah, they were probably on the verge of a breakdown, I should think. And it's pure luck in this occasion that I or somebody, it wouldn't have to be me, it happened to be me in this occasion, came along and had that conversation. And that's when the realization came through. It's like, well, there's literally no one I know who would have said that to me.
Yeah.
And now you say it, it's like, of course these are terrible ideas. Of course I'm just trying terrible idea after terrible idea to try and make something that's broken fixed. But it can't fix it because it's broken. And that was the first thing that I realised was the loneliness piece. So action one out of this is if you know somebody who you would class as an entrepreneur, business, whatever you want to call them, just check in on them. Make sure that they're okay. Ask them to tell you that they're okay. Ask to explain how they're okay, because they will do a very good job most of the time of protecting everybody else about that from that pain that they might be going through. But also sometimes they're oblivious.
Yeah.
Because they've had success or what have you. So loneliness is one of the first things that comes out of there for me. So checking in on people. And then it's then a case of, what can we do for people who maybe don't recognise themselves in that situation? So totally. If you're starting to, we're 6 minutes into the podcast now and you're suddenly thinking, oh, hang on a minute, pay attention to that feeling.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody. It does not have to be us. We're more than happy to do it. We're very experienced coaches. We're not doing this for fun. We're looking to promote what we do, but it doesn't need to be a professional to start with. You just need to have some conversations with someone who will be honest with you.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need that to be a professional, don't you? Yeah. But ultimately, if you've got anyone around you that you could go to and be honest with, and I suppose trust, because the amazing thing you get with us is confidentiality, it's not going to go anywhere, then, if you've got that sort of access, do it, because you do need to just have some sense checking going on. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And I look at people like even Stephen Bartlett's talked about that, hasn't he, on previous podcasts, that sort of thing, just not having anyone to talk to, anyone to listen to. So I assume that's something you've come across quite a bit.
No, and actually listening to you talking there, the word I had was, it's hard sometimes to regulate yourself. So as an entrepreneur, I guess you are lonely and you are sometimes on your own and you are sometimes kind of like not sure, like, am I doing the right thing? And I guess that feeling of people not being as honest as they should be around you is dangerous, I guess, because what then happens is you believe everything that you're saying, and actually we all know that, we're not always right all the time. And it's having that ability, isn't it, I talk about structure quite a lot, and it is an unsexy word, but it is so important for anyone that's trying to do something where they're on their own. Building some structuring and some routine into your day is absolutely critical. You can't sit in front of a computer all day long and expect to be at the top of your game. It just doesn't work like that. Building in some structure, some flexibility, some routines and things like that are really important. So that's when I talk about self-regulating yourself, that's what I mean. I mean, putting a foundation, a structure in place that enables you to be free thinking, but also enables you to take that time out, enables you to think about your mental health, enables you to, think about your well-being and so forth. So that's self-regulation. And I guess if your circle that you're part of is not an honest circle with you all the time, then it's almost thinking like, who else do I need to surround myself with? And Oliver, one of the biggest things we do as coaches and mentors is shit gets real, and we have to be honest with some people. And sometimes that honesty can really hurt, and actually, but it is needed. And I would say sometimes our circle, our network isn't as honest as it should be. It's just giving us pats on the back and telling us how amazing we are. But the reality is actually you need that honesty bit as well to help you. And I guess that's the non-sexy part of being an entrepreneur, because sometimes you've got to swallow that medicine in order to move forward. You've got to listen to that critique in order to do things differently to change the outcome. And the other thing I would say as well is this, notion sometimes, there's a drawing, isn't there, of the man in a cave, and he's hitting a hammer in this cave, and he's trying to get to this point of success, and he's maybe got about 10 more swings of the axe to go.
Oh, and yeah,
and he turns round. And I think entrepreneurship is a little bit like that. And there's two things I want to say here. One is, when is the right time to turn back? Because sometimes you do need to turn back because you're hitting something that's just not going to work. But then the other, when do you keep going? When do you keep moving forward? And what I often say is, the research bit is the critical bit there. It's that information, that the digging, the knowledge transfer, all that side of it first, so that you know how big the journey is going to be and when you're going to potentially get there based on you doing your homework. And then, that confidence thing, which I know we've talked about before, and I'm sure it's going to raise its face in other podcasts that we do. It's having that confidence and belief in yourself. But entrepreneurship, it's a lonely place, and it's not all glitz and glamour.
Yeah.
You've got to be prepared for the long haul, and also you've got to be prepared for some people to not believe in what you're doing as well, I think.
Yes,
but yeah, that's what sort of comes to mind on that one. That self-regulate. How do you regulate yourself so that you almost make yourself in a position where you're just stronger to be able to do those things.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because obviously my example was purely being surrounded with positivity, but it can be the other thing. You've got a great idea, it's a great idea, but you just keep meeting rejection or negativity or frustration. Again, same thing. You need some people who can say, no, you're heading on a good track. You're doing everything in the right way, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you may not be getting that either, so it goes both ways. And I think, one of our key components of this podcast series is to give people solutions that they can do. So the first one we've obviously said to check in on people. The second one for me is, obviously you can reach out to myself and Stephen, that one's a given, but having some sort of non-exec directory role, whether it be a formal or informal thing. I know you've sat on boards and sit on boards even still now, and I've started offering that as a thing as well, where you can just come in and have somebody who doesn't necessarily need experience in what you're doing. That might be beneficial to have more than one if you can. Obviously depends on what you can afford, but somebody who is there and has a purpose to give you that honesty, and you're actually literally engaging with them in some sort of arrangement. It will likely be a fee involved in some way, shape or form, but that sort of non-exec, so they're not a decision maker, but they're there, and they've got nothing really on it other than your success. That's what they want to see, and they've got a lot of experience in various avenues. So that would be the first thing. The second thing would be to consume content that is helpful. And I always think that there's a really interesting book called The E-Myth Revisited by a guy called Michael Gerber, which just talks about the entrepreneurial myth. I don't want to go too much into that book, because it's one of those things that when you read it or you listen to it, it'll start resonating with you, but it will just help you look at where you're at on the entrepreneurial journey. And I want to give you too much away. I will give one slight spoiler. Are you under the bonnet all the time, or are you actually up there moving your business forward? That's really the dynamic at play. And far too many times we're finding entrepreneurs not being entrepreneurs. We're finding them just being crazy busy fools who are working silly hours. And I suppose, imagine the question is, what would happen if you got ill? How would everything, and if you don't have a good answer to that, then you need to have a little think about it. And that can be down to micromanagement, that can be down to trust issues, that can be down to lack of self-belief that you talked about earlier. So consuming some content that's going to get you thinking in the right way, and that's a great start for 10, the E-Myth Revisited. I think that's going to be a really, really beneficial thing to do as well. Are there any specific things that, I know I've sort of jumped this on you literally about 2 minutes before we hit record, but are there any things that you've suggested to clients in the past that you can think of that would be useful? Any books, ideas, techniques? One of the things that really screams out with what you're saying, this is for businesses where they've become a little bit more established, and that they're into their entrepreneurship game, and that is write these two things down. So, working in the business, working on the business. And I think sometimes what happens with entrepreneurship is we don't get the percentage right of those two things.
if you're working in the business, generally you can't always see. You're so far down the hole that you can't see much. When you're working on the business, you can be in a fallback position where everything's very visible. And, you know, your peripheral vision is just so much better because of it. And it's something that, it's a technique that I've often used to allow people to start thinking about, okay, today, was I working in the business or was I working on the business? What things are working in the business? What things are working on the business? And it's just a great way to really simplify how you can be more productive as an entrepreneur within your business.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a good one. Definitely. I think it's something that it's so easy to do. It's so easy to do. And you know me and my slight edge obsession. And that's always about the things that are so easy to do are so easy not to do. So it's so easy not to let somebody else do something and do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's so easy. I mean, they're just multiple authors of books have come out with different points of looking at that, and or different ways of looking at that, and that is absolutely crucial. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that one of the things that I also feel is quite it's topical. I don't know. I don't think I'm right or wrong on this. So just as a view, that I would encourage, and in fact, segue, I did notice Daniel Priestley talking about this, which is probably why it sprung to my mind when I was looking at social media earlier. But he was talking about not jumping, so I'm on to funding here, not jumping down the venture capitalist route, because you are probably, not always, but you are probably never ever going to be in charge of your business again. You are probably only ever going to be answerable to people who are only ever going to care when they get their big, fat, chunky checks. Whereas if you are thinking about funding, think about the angel investor route. And I thought that was really, really interesting. The difference between the two is worth Googling, but my sort of interpretation of angel investors is that they tend to be a group normally of smaller, still wealthy people, but smaller people who are putting smaller chunks in, probably collectively, into your business, but have a pool of knowledge and stuff they want to throw at you. Whereas venture capitalist groups tend to just be big financial hubs that aren't going to give you a huge amount of help. So if that's a conversation that you are considering right now, again, it probably goes back to your circle. Look at who's giving that advice.
Yeah.
Make sure that you've had both options explored, because it might just be that the person listening to this now is thinking, yep, I need some investment. Great. I don't see a problem with that. Where is it coming from?
Yeah.
What are the rules? Because it might look like some venture capitalists might be a bigger investment. It's quite likely it will be. But what are you having to sell, literally? Yeah. To achieve that was the point that I think it was Daniel Priestley was making. Whereas this group of entrepreneurs who want to help, they're often, these angel investors have been successful but miss it. Yeah. And they want to get back involved, but they don't want to have the stress that they've had previously because they've been down this route. So you get a lot more in principle.
Knowledge
from
transfer
them
as well, isn't it? I guess it depends on where your business is. My experience with VCs, they're more than happy to put the money in and for you to do what you do.
Yeah.
And with angel investors, they are happy to put their money in, but they also bring a wealth of knowledge and experience. So it probably depends on what you're looking for in your business, because I know some people don't want someone getting involved because they just want the cash, because they want to be able to do it the way that they want to do it. But if that's a large sum of cash, then you need to just be mindful that you are giving part of your business away. And depending on what the covenants are, you know, a lot of the time, you know, you could, you know, I've seen businesses where it's gone well and businesses where it's not gone so well because there's been so many things they've got to hit, and if they don't hit them, they're quite ruthless. Yeah. Where an angel investor, potentially, they might want to work a bit more with you, support you, try and get you over those sort of those molehills. And so it really depends on your business. But I think both can work well. But again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You've got to do your research, do your due diligence, be clear about what it is that you want. Yeah. You know, whether that's in half a decade or in a decade's time, and then that will impact whether you go down the angel investors route or whether you go down the VC route. Yeah. You know,
because again, I think that's a really key point, that exit strategy piece, because you might say, I don't know, create a wonderful company that suddenly gets valued at 20 million. You think, wow, we've succeeded, and the VC's no, 50 million, and you've been like, whoa. Oh, we've been working our absolute socks off here. We've got to here. This is exactly where I was when I started businesses, where I thought we've hit that point, and we're like, they're not even close to where these guys are going to agree to a sale. And I've seen that happen, and that's demoralising. As it happens, those people did achieve it, but it was many more years of stress. And that's the final piece, actually, that I forgot. Actually, hands up, disclaimer, I forgot. Burnout. That was one of the... If I'm absolutely honest, that was one of the key things I wanted to get out of this episode, and that's only come to me at minute 20.
For those of you that aren't watching on video, he's screaming right now.
So, burnout. That is something that I think is really something that entrepreneurs are at risk of.
Yeah.
And the
100%.
problem with that is it tends to catch up with you really quickly, and suddenly you don't see it coming, and then bam, it happens. It can be triggered by an illness. That certainly happened in the past, and suddenly the immune system's knocked in some way, shape or form. It can be like a serious illness can just come and throw you. Obviously, there's many ways it can show up. So again, if you're thinking of somebody else, if you think of someone who's an entrepreneur that you know, check in on their health. And if you are an entrepreneur, I know you don't want to hear this if you are in this space, but eating healthily, exercising healthily, doing sensible hours, putting the screen time down from time to time at home, spending time with friends and or family, you must do it. It's not a case of you should do it. The ones who manage that lifestyle and get to success are just lucky. There's no real plan. That's just, for whatever reason, things have gone well for them. But I can think of countless numbers of people that it hasn't gone well for because they've had various different ailments that have come out of it, or and there's some people it's a short-term thing, but some people it can be medium to long-term, stroke permanent. So that's the real thing. Then that for me, that I don't think we've got any other greater actions than to look at your lifestyle, look at your health, look at your exercise, and look at your circle of people that you engage with. This would be a great sort of line in the sand moment to do that, to actually go through an exercise. Obviously, you could do it with one of us. You can do it professionally, but actually, there's nothing stopping you doing this right now. As soon as you finish listening to the podcast, get a pen and paper, write down the answers to all of those sort of questions. What does my diet look like? How often do I exercise? How many hours am I on a screen or doing whatever it is I do? How much time do I spend with my friends and my family? Am I a good husband, wife, mother? Don't know, whatever you are in that situation. Have you neglected anybody or anything along those lines? Because these are all things that you can check as to how well things are actually going, because it's quite hard when you are literally in the thick of it. So I think that's a really great point that I wish I'd made much earlier on in the podcast, but I will overcome this by just using this as the snippet for advertising the episode, so I will come out of this smelling like roses. But what was your final thoughts on anything that we've talked about today?
It's really good that is the final point, because I think it's the most important point. And that whole well-being and looking after your mindset is so critical. And whether it's water intake, whether it's your nutrition, and whether it's the exercise, and the one that we haven't talked about, which I think is the most important one, and that is sleep. And sleep deprivation is a thing. And one of the things I often say, and I would say 75% of the people that come to me, the bit that's so important to them is this bit on the mentoring and coaching side. And they want someone to hold them accountable, because that's what they need, because they know that this bit's not happening. And I would say sleep is the one that really allows people to really change their life. Like dramatically change their life. Because once they get that one right, the other bits are easier. So I would absolutely, first, second, third, and fourth, what you've said about this area being so critical to, and not to entrepreneurs, but to anyone in business in general. And do not forsake it. Do not underestimate the power of getting these bits right.
That's a really good one, actually. So I don't want to drag this out any longer than it needs to be, but
drag it out.
That makes me just think about this thing that I'm not sure I love. I don't think I hate it, but I don't love it. The whole 5 a.m. club thing. I'm not sure about it. I think if you are someone who needs 8 hours sleep and you're doing the 5 a.m. club, I would wonder if I came around your house, would you be asleep at 9 p.m.?
I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to break something
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, you up and you. That's fine. So if you're doing,
I like to go to bed super early.
I'm similar to be fair.
I am such, I'm the killjoy. I am the one that goes to bed early because I like to wake up early.
Yeah.
And that's because I think forget about the 5 a.m. club, because I know there's been a lot, sorry, this is going to drag on, but hey, this is what it's about.
It's relevant. I think a lot of people think about it.
Everyone goes on about this 5 a.m. club, right? And the big deal about it. It shouldn't really be called the 5 a.m. club. What it should actually be called is, what do I need to do to give myself more time in the day, right? Because some people might flip it and they might create their own way of doing it. I know before my daughter was born, I wanted to get some time. So what I did was I woke up an hour earlier. But it wasn't the 5 a.m. club. This was way back in 2015. And I just decided I needed to give myself an extra hour. What am I going to do? Right, I'm going to wake up an hour earlier. So I think it's about what you can do in your day to give yourself time back. And I know some people that have been really clever. So some people have managed to get time back by doing things slightly differently. So don't think about this as a 5 a.m. club. I think you need to think about, how do I restructure my life in order to give my time back? Because you mentioned something earlier as well, Oliver. You mentioned around, some people find it difficult, entrepreneurs find it difficult to give that job to someone else to do. But guess what? If you had 50 jobs to do in a day and 30 of those jobs you gave to someone else, guess what? You've just got some time back. So the 5 a.m. club is great and it works well for a lot of people. But what I'm saying is it's not about the 5 a.m. club. It's about, what can I do in my day to give myself more time?
Yeah, no, that's key. And I must admit, I'm not crapping on getting up early. My alarm is 5:30 a.m. and I rarely need it. I'm normally up, but I go to bed, similarly to Stephen, quite early. And that's my point. I think a lot of these 5 a.m. club fanatics aren't going to bed at sensible times, you bad people. And if you're getting, like, some people seem to be able to function on 6 hours sleep, but I just hope it's purely down to their physical, their physical being, and they're not using substances and so forth like that, and that they're going to again run into this burnout issue. But
that's a topic for another podcast.
Yeah, that is a topic for another podcast. That not necessarily nasty ones. Coffees in amongst that. But anyway, it's to make sure you're getting the right amount of sleep, I suppose, is the key bit. So if you're saying I'm going to get up at 5, brilliant, because you can get a lot done. I love being up at 5:30, walk dogs, do yoga, all these things that I've done before the day even gets started for many people. But I'm not going to sleep at 11 p.m. or midnight or something like that. That is not going to work. So I just think it comes with a little bit of a health warning on that. But burnout, sleep, health, the whole thing, if it's not just isolated to entrepreneurs, of course it's not. This is relevant for a huge number of people. But our focus for this podcast was them. So I feel that's a very good place to finish. I think there's a lot of things for people to think about there, a lot of actions that they can choose to do. But have you any final thoughts?
Don't tackle everything at once, because we've talked about a lot today. So I think it's just about breaking it down, but don't ignore.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Good episode. As always, we're always happy to hear from you. If you've got any suggestions for things you'd like us to talk about, we have a fairly lengthy list of episodes already in the pipeline, but we will listen to any of the suggestions that we start getting and consider putting them on for future episodes. So until the next one, been a pleasure, and we'll speak to you again.